Ever feel like, your brain just doesn't quite fit in? You know what I mean?
Like you're wired a little differently.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the intriguing idea we're diving into today.
On the Mad Genius Thesis.
Right. We're going to be exploring that complex
Yeah.
and often misunderstood
Mhm.
relationship between creativity and what we often label as mental illness.
Exactly. And we're really excited to take a deep dive into this book,
Yeah.
The Power of Different by Dr. Gail Saltz. It really challenges us to rethink
It does.
how we view conditions like, dyslexia,
Oh, yeah.
ADD, anxiety,
Mm.
and so many others. Get ready
Yeah.
to have your assumptions challenged as we uncover the hidden strengths and surprising advantages that can accompany these brain differences.
Absolutely.
I'm excited.
Me too.
Okay, so
Let's jump right in.
to kick things off,
Yeah.
let's talk about this idea of the inverted U-shaped curve
Okay.
that Dr. Saltz mentions in the book. It suggests that there's this sweet spot for creativity somewhere between
Right.
typical brain function
Yes.
and severe mental illness.
It's such a fascinating concept. It really gets at the heart of this whole debate about creativity and mental illness. Think of it like this. Imagine a spectrum of brain activity.
Okay.
At one end,
Yeah.
you have what we might call, typical functioning.
Right.
And at the other end, you have severe mental illness.
Yeah.
Now, the idea is that creativity peaks somewhere in the middle
Right.
of this spectrum.
So someone with mild to moderate bipolar disorder,
Yeah.
for example, might actually be more creatively productive than someone without it.
Exactly. And we see this pattern across a range of conditions.
That's interesting.
It's not about romanticizing mental illness.
Right.
Of course.
Of course.
These are serious conditions that require proper care and treatment.
Absolutely.
But it does raise the question, what is it about these different brains that might contribute to heightened creativity?
That's so interesting. And one of the conditions Dr. Saltz explores is dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
We often associate it
Right.
with reading challenges.
We do.
But she digs deeper,
Yeah.
revealing this surprising connection between dyslexia and exceptional spatial reasoning, problem solving, and big picture thinking.
And those are skills that are incredibly valuable in so many fields.
Yeah.
And it really makes you wonder how many brilliant minds have been overlooked.
Right.
Or even mislabeled simply because they struggled with reading in a traditional classroom setting.
Totally. The book shares this compelling story about Dr. Beryl Benacerraf,
Yes.
a world-renowned radiologist who actually discovered a key fetal indicator for Down syndrome.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
What's remarkable is that she accomplished this despite being dyslexic.
So her difficulty with reading didn't hold her back at all.
Not at all. In fact, Dr. Saltz suggests that Dr. Benacerraf's dyslexia may have actually played a role in her success. Because she struggled with reading, she naturally gravitated towards images and patterns, developing incredible visual and spatial skills.
So her brain found a different way to excel.
It did.
It's almost like she had to hack the system
Right.
to unlock her true potential.
And this idea of workarounds is a common theme in the book.
Okay.
People with dyslexia often develop these incredible coping mechanisms and strategies to thrive in a world that isn't always designed for their way of thinking.
It's like their brains are wired for a different operating system.
Yes.
And they have to constantly find ways to translate their ideas and abilities into a language that the rest of the world understands.
Exactly. And speaking of different operating systems, let's shift gears and talk about ADD.
Okay.
Another condition that's often misunderstood and misrepresented.
Yeah. When most people think of ADD, they think of distractibility and difficulty focusing.
Right.
But the power of different flips that script, highlighting the incredible originality and capacity for creative breakthroughs that can come with an ADD brain.
It's funny, isn't it, how we often view distractibility as a negative trait.
Right.
But what if it's actually a sign of a brain that's constantly making connections, seeing patterns that others miss?
That reminds me of something that Dr. Saltz said in the book.
Yeah.
She wrote that individuals with ADD often answer the right question, but to the wrong problem.
I love that quote.
It's a great quote.
It perfectly captures that unique way of thinking.
Yeah.
That ability to see things from a different angle. It's like their brains are always searching for the most interesting puzzle to solve, even if it's not the one everyone else is focused on.
Right. And the book also highlights the link between ADD and sensation seeking.
Right.
That constant need for stimulation.
Yeah.
That drive to explore and experiment. That can be incredibly powerful, especially in creative fields. Think of artists,
Absolutely.
musicians,
Right.
entrepreneurs. They often thrive on that sense of novelty and excitement.
Totally.
Dr. Saltz uses the example of paleontologist Stephen Stanley.
Yeah.
Despite struggling in school due to his ADD, he learned to harness his distractible brain, leading to groundbreaking work in his field.
He found a way to translate his different way of thinking into a unique approach to his work, and it paid off.
It's really remarkable.
It is.
So what we're seeing here
Yeah.
is that these conditions, which are often viewed through a lens of deficit,
Right.
can actually be sources of incredible strength and creativity.
It's all about finding the right environment and the right tools to allow those strengths to flourish.
Totally.
It's like we're all carrying around these different sets of tools.
Yeah.
And some of us have tools that are a little more unconventional,
Right.
but that doesn't mean they're any less valuable.
Right.
In fact, those unique tools might be exactly what's needed to solve a particular problem or create something truly extraordinary.
I love that. This is blowing my mind.
Yeah, right.
And we've only just begun to scratch the surface here.
Yeah, there's so much more.
I'm eager to dive deeper into Dr. Saltz's insights on anxiety, depression, and some of the other conditions she explores.
Oh, yeah, it gets even more interesting.
And the power of different. Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis. Before the break, we were talking about some pretty amazing ideas about the connection between creativity and what we call mental illness.
Really challenging those conventional notions of normal and different.
Totally. And this deep dive into the power of different is making me question everything I thought I knew about the brain.
It's a real eye-opener.
It is.
It forces you to consider the possibility that what we perceive as limitations might actually be hidden strengths just waiting to be discovered.
We were just starting to talk about ADD and how it can fuel these creative breakthroughs.
Right.
But what about anxiety? It's a condition that so many people struggle with, and it's often seen as just purely negative.
Right.
But Dr. Saltz suggests that even anxiety can have an upside.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because on the surface, anxiety seems like the enemy of creativity. It can be
Right.
so debilitating,
Yeah.
so overwhelming.
Totally.
But when you look closer,
Yeah.
you start to see how those same traits that make life so difficult,
Yeah.
that heightened awareness, that meticulous attention to detail,
Right.
that drive for perfection, can actually be incredibly valuable in the right context.
So those tendencies that might make it hard to relax and just kind of go with the flow
Yeah.
can actually be assets in certain situations.
Exactly. Imagine a surgeon, for example.
Okay.
A certain amount of anxiety, that hypervigilance, can actually be beneficial.
Okay.
It can help them stay focused, anticipate problems, make sure every detail is perfect.
It's like they're channeling that nervous energy into precision and meticulousness.
Precisely. And think about writers, musicians, artists,
Right.
those who create things.
Yeah.
Often there's a certain level of anxiety that drives them to refine their work,
Makes sense.
to keep pushing until it's just right.
Dr. Saltz uses the example of author David Sedaris,
Oh, yeah.
who's been very open about his struggles with OCD and anxiety.
Yeah, his work is so full of wit and sharp observation.
It is.
It's fascinating to consider how his anxiety might play a role in that.
Yeah. So instead of seeing his anxiety as something to be suppressed or eradicated, he's found a way to incorporate it into his creative process.
It seems that way.
That's incredible.
And this brings up a really important point about the power of different.
Okay.
It's not about pretending that these conditions aren't real or that they don't cause suffering. It's about acknowledging the full spectrum of human experience and recognizing that what might be a challenge in one context can be a strength in another.
And that even within these conditions that we label as disorders, there can be so much creativity and unique perspectives.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we talked about anxiety. What about depression?
Yeah,
It seems almost counterintuitive to think of depression as being linked to creativity.
right.
It's a condition that's associated with hopelessness, lethargy, lack of motivation.
Right. It's a really complex issue.
Yeah.
And as with all of these conditions, we need to approach it with sensitivity and nuance.
Of course.
But Dr. Saltz raises some really interesting questions about the potential link between depression and certain types of creative expression.
So she argues that those who have experienced the depths of depression might have a unique understanding of the human condition,
Yeah.
a depth of feeling and insight that can form their art or work in powerful ways.
Exactly. Think about some of the great Artists, writers, and musicians throughout history,
Yeah.
many of them struggled with depression, and their work often reflected that darkness, that profound understanding of pain and loss.
But she's careful to point out that she's not romanticizing depression at all.
Of course not. Depression is a serious condition that can be incredibly debilitating.
For sure.
But it's interesting to consider how it might shape the creative process for some individuals.
Totally. And she uses the example of author Anne Rice, who channeled her grief over the loss of her daughter into her writing.
Such powerful and moving novels.
It sounds like she was able to transform her pain into something beautiful and meaningful.
It's a beautiful way to put it. And while we certainly wouldn't wish depression on anyone, it's fascinating to explore how it might, in some cases, contribute to a particular kind of creative depth and sensitivity.
It challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about what it means to be creative.
Right.
And to recognize that inspiration can come from unexpected places,
It can.
even from those darkest corners of human experience.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about dyslexia, ADD, anxiety, and depression.
A lot.
But Dr. Saltz doesn't stop there.
Nope.
She goes on to explore the fascinating and often misunderstood world of bipolar disorder, exploring how its dramatic highs and lows can fuel creative bursts.
Right. That's where this whole idea of the inverted U-shaped curve really comes into play.
Exactly.
That sweet spot between extreme states where creativity seems to flourish.
And the book tells the story of journalist Bill Lichtenstein,
Yeah.
who lives with bipolar disorder and has found ways to manage his condition while also building a successful career.
It's incredible.
He describes his experience as living life on a three-dimensional chessboard.
What a vivid description.
It is. What do you think he means by that?
What do we think he means by that? Well, I think he's talking about the intensity of the bipolar experience.
Okay.
That feeling of being constantly bombarded with stimuli, ideas, emotions.
Yeah.
It's like his brain is always working on multiple levels,
Yeah.
processing information from every angle.
That can be both exhilarating and exhausting, I imagine.
Absolutely.
But he also talks about how this heightened state of awareness,
Yes.
this ability to see multiple perspectives at once, can be incredibly valuable in his work as a journalist.
It allows him to connect the dots,
Yeah.
see the bigger picture, understand complex issues in a way that others might not.
Totally.
Yeah.
But of course, there's a flip side to this. Dr. Saltz talks about the concept of hypomania, which is a milder form of mania,
Right.
often associated with increased energy, creativity,
Yeah.
productivity.
It's a delicate balance.
It is.
Because if that hypomania tips over into full-blown mania,
Yeah.
it can be very disruptive,
Right.
even dangerous.
It's like walking a tightrope between creative brilliance and potential chaos.
And that's why finding the right treatment, medication, and support system is so crucial for individuals with bipolar disorder.
For sure.
It's about finding that sweet spot where they can harness the creative energy of hypomania
Yeah.
without letting it spiral out of control.
It's about finding that balance between the extremes.
Exactly.
And that's a theme that runs throughout The Power of Different, isn't it?
It is.
Recognizing that these brain differences,
Yeah.
these conditions that we view as purely negatives,
Right.
can also be sources of incredible strength and creativity.
If we approach them with understanding and compassion.
This has been such a rich and thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah, it has.
And we're not done yet. There's one more condition that Dr. Saltz explores in The Power of Different, Turk, that I'm really eager to discuss.
Hey.
Schizophrenia.
A very important topic.
It's a topic that's often shrouded in misunderstanding and stigma,
It is.
and I'm really curious to hear how she approaches it.
Schizophrenia is perhaps the most misunderstood of all the conditions we've discussed today.
I would agree.
And Dr. Saltz tackles it with incredible sensitivity and insight.
I can't wait to dive into that conversation. Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis. We've been on quite a journey today, exploring these fascinating and often unexpected connections between creativity and mental illness.
Really challenging those conventional notions about what it means to be, normal and different.
Totally. And this deep dive into the power of different has really been a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah, me too.
It's made me realize just how much we still don't understand about the brain
It really has.
and the incredible diversity of human
It's
experience.
humbling, isn't it?
It is.
To think that these conditions we often, view as purely negative, as
Yeah.
things to be feared or avoided, might actually hold the keys to unlocking new ways of thinking,
Right.
creating and understanding the world.
And before the break, we were about to dive into schizophrenia.
Right.
a topic that's often shrouded in misunderstanding and stigma.
It is a crucial conversation to have.
It is.
Especially given the way schizophrenia is often portrayed in the media,
Yeah.
popular culture.
Right.
We tend to focus on the most extreme cases,
Yeah.
the most sensationalized stories, which create this sense of fear and distance.
And this otherness
Right.
around schizophrenia,
Exactly.
which makes it even harder for people who are living with the condition to feel understood
Yeah.
and supported.
And that's why Dr. Saltz's approach is so refreshing.
I agree.
She doesn't shy away from the challenges of schizophrenia,
Right.
but she also highlights the incredible resilience and creativity that many individuals with this condition demonstrate.
And one of the most powerful examples she shares is the story of Elin Sachs,
Oh, yes.
a legal scholar who has lived with schizophrenia for many years and has become a leading advocate for mental health awareness.
Her story is truly remarkable. Despite facing these immense challenges,
Yeah.
she's managed to achieve incredible things in her field.
Absolutely.
She's a professor at USC Law,
Hmm.
she's written several acclaimed books, and she's a MacArthur Genius Grant recipient.
It's like she's taken those challenges,
Yeah.
those experiences that might have broken someone else,
Right.
and turned them into fuel for her intellectual and creative pursuits.
It's a testament to the human spirit, isn't it? To that innate drive to create, to
Yeah.
connect, to make meaning out of even the most difficult experiences.
And Dr. Saltz suggests that Elin Sachs' unique perspective, shaped by her experience with schizophrenia, has actually informed her work and scholarship in really valuable ways.
It's fascinating to consider how her way of thinking and
Yeah.
her way of seeing the world might offer insights that others might miss.
Totally.
She brings a different lens to the study of law, a different way of understanding human behavior and motivation.
It really challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about what constitutes normal thinking
Right.
and to recognize the value of diverse perspectives,
Yes.
even those that might seem unconventional.
And this brings us to a really important point that Dr. Saltz emphasizes throughout The Power of Different. It's about moving away from this idea of fixing people,
Oh, wait.
trying to erase or suppress these brain differences.
Right.
It's about finding ways to support individuals,
Yeah.
to help them manage their symptoms,
Yeah.
but also to celebrate and nurture their unique strengths and abilities.
It's about creating a world where people feel comfortable being themselves,
Right.
where they can embrace their differences and contribute their unique gifts to society.
Exactly. And this requires a shift in mindset, not just on an individual level, but also on a societal level.
Yeah.
We need to rethink our education systems,
Yeah.
workplaces, right?
Or communities to be more inclusive and accommodating of neurodiversity.
It's about recognizing that what we might perceive as limitations or weaknesses
Right.
might actually be untapped potential.
Totally.
Different ways of thinking and being that can enrich our world.
In countless ways.
And that's what the power of different is all about, isn't it?
It is.
Embracing the full spectrum of human experience
Celebrating our differences.
and creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
I think that's a perfect way to sum it up.
This deep dive into the power of different has been incredibly inspiring and thought-provoking for me.
Me too.
It's challenged me to reconsider my own assumptions about mental illness.
Yeah.
And to see the world through a new lens.
The new lens.
One that embraces diversity.
Right.
And
yeah.
celebrates the unique contributions of all individuals.
Absolutely. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
It does.
Makes you ask new questions, see the world with fresh eyes.
Appreciate the incredible beauty and complexity of the human brain.
Well, that's a perfect place to end it for today.
I think so too.
Thanks for joining us on the Mad Genius Thesis.
Yes, thank you.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.